so great I don't have a mark on my face, and I upset Sonny Liston, and I just turned 22 years old. I must be the greatest. I told the world, I talk to God every day. If God's with the king, no matter, he'll get the same. I shook up the world. I shook up the world. I shook up the world. I shook up the world.
I said, can I be a legend? Search your soul and answer me this question. Do you think I have what it takes to be great, but still be humble and learn from my mistakes?
Good night, everyone. Welcome back to your favorite sports show. I have your favorite guest with me tonight, Steezy A. Smith. As usual, he's family on the show. Welcome, Steezy. How are you?
Man, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. Real quickly, birthday shout out to King Neil. If you guys haven't already, please go wish him a happy birthday. He does a lot for the show. I mean, so I'm not really a part of it, but a lot of times I am, or I feel like I am. And so, you know, Neil, he's a huge part of it from what I see, and he deserves all the love in the world. So y'all go wish him a happy birthday.
Well, Steezy, you're too kind because you are indeed a party family of the show. You know that. But yes, indeed, you beat me to the punch. You may not see him in front. No, you're good. You may not see him in front of the screen a lot, but it is indeed our producer, our cameraman, or everything, Neil Hoyt's birthday. So as I wrote today on multiple platforms, this show cannot happen. Literally cannot happen because he's a guy who controls everything back screen and I can't do it. But this show does not happen without Neil Hoyt. So a blessed birthday to you. I won't let the people know how old he is, but he's older than me. So, you know, that is a bit of age. And you heard him there, that is Neil. But thank you. Oh, they can't. Oh, well. Thank you, Steezy, for coming on, though. Happy birthday to Neil. And, well, happy big win for the Buffalo Bills last night, Steezy. I'm sure you watched it. It was not close whatsoever. A 38-20 complete shellacking beatdown. Annihilation, whatever you want to call it, of the Kansas City Chiefs, who are now 2-3. So, Steezy, quickly, how big of a win was that for Buffalo last night?
Oh, this was major, massive. A lot of people were kind of shutting out the Buffalo Bills, if that makes sense. You know, a lot of people were saying that, oh, they have these shouts over the Houston Texans, over the Miami Dolphins. They shellacked the Washington football team. But a lot of people were saying that, where's the quality of competition? That's been solved, I like to think, with that victory over the Kansas City Chiefs. And not only that, they were Super Bowl contenders last year, correct? And some of their biggest weaknesses were their lack of a ground game, and their defense didn't have a quality pass rush. You know, their defense was mediocre at best. We know what's crazy? This year, Buffalo is actually top 5 in the NFL in rushing with over 120 a game. And against the Kansas City Chiefs last night, they had another great rushing performance. I know a lot of it has to do with Josh Allen's legs, but on paper, or actually not on paper, but given my eye test, Zach Moss looks better. Devin Singletary looks better. The offensive line is starting to pick up the pace. And so their ground game, which is something that wasn't there last year, is now present. It was there last night. It's been present all throughout the season. Their defense, first in the league in least amount of points allowed. And I think it's like 11 or 12. And so that defense has not only been shutting out the lower tier teams, now they're holding teams like the Kansas City Chiefs to 20 points. So their two biggest issues from last year have now been solved throughout the course of this season, and was not any more evident than it was last night against a still, in my eyes, an elite team like the Kansas City Chiefs. They didn't just beat down the Kansas City Chiefs. They blew them out of Kansas City in Arrowhead. And so, yes, to me, this victory was massive, was major. And I think it really cements Buffalo's status as a top team as it currently stands in the National Football League.
Steezy, you wanted to name me, so I'll say I was one of those people who was not big on Buffalo's offseason. As you mentioned, they had two major areas of concern. Mm-hmm. I felt like they refused to or commit to running the football, and their pass rush was not what it should be for a team obviously looking to beat Kansas City and any other AFC title contender. And through the first 5 weeks of the season, I don't know, but all of those things have clearly been solved. And they did it without doing much through the draft in terms of addressing the run. No, this is a team that is averaging, I want to say, 4.5 yards per rush. This is a team that, as you mentioned, I think they're averaging less than 13, points per game for their opponents. 2 shutouts, albeit against the Dolphins and the Houston Texans, but these are still teams in the National Football League and not NCAA college teams. You shut out those 2 teams. Even the loss against Pittsburgh, I think they only gave up 23 points. You held
and
this
one of that
Kansas
was
City-
the special teams.
Yeah, and one of those
was because of special teams. It wasn't even because,
Yeah, so basically you gave up 17 points against Steelers, 20 to the Chiefs in Arrowhead, while causing like 4 turnovers in this game. You're able to run the football, and quite frankly, if the season stopped today, and I know it's only 5 weeks in, Josh Allen is like a top 3 MVP candidate easily, if not the leading MVP candidate right now. At first, I don't want to give a lot of stock into regular season wins, but this is as big as it comes, Steezy, and I'm going to say this. I don't like to, make these way out their statements. I know we talked about this last week and week before. Who was the best team in the AFC? I think Buffalo easily has a stake on that claim right now. Like when you beat Kansas City that bad in Arrowhead of all places, you're giving up 12 points per game. You're able to run the football. Josh Allen looks like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Steezy, I want to say right now, this team has a legitimate claim to say they are comfortably in the AFC.
Bro, see, I wish Marcus would have been on the show because I was on his show last week, and if I'm not mistaken, he didn't even have Buffalo in his top 5 because we did a power rankings. He didn't have Buffalo in the top 5. And I remember for me, I had Buffalo in my number 2 spot, and we kind of we had a little back and forth. We had a little debate about my placement of Buffalo on my power rankings, and he was talking to me about how he's not sold. He was talking to me about the lack of quality competition that they faced thus far before the Chiefs. And I was like, yo, let's give it some time. They're playing the Chiefs. Let's see what happens. And, then we can start making judgments and, assumptions and whatnot. And so, I hope he's watching. I hope he tunes in later on. But I'm curious to hear, his thoughts on the Buffalo Bills because I feel like they really shut him up.
I have to see, and when you take that debacle against Pittsburgh out of the equation, and you're right, I forgot all about the special team score. You're talking about a team that could possibly be or should possibly be 5-0. But if you take that bad game out of it, and I can't hold that against them because I had a 38-3 loss to the Saints. I know we're a completely different unit after that. Can arguably say not only is Buffalo the best team in the AFC, but they can stake a claim to being the best team in the NFL. I know Arizona's unbeaten and they'll have something to say about that, but if there was a statement game to have, it was last night. So on the flip side, Steezy, then there is another team. And if we're talking about the Bills, well, the other team that was in that Monday Night Football showing, this team that's been to 3 straight AFC title games, 2 straight Super Bowls, and won one of them, the Kansas City Chiefs, are now an unbelievable 2-3. After that game, Steezy, are the Chiefs in trouble?
As far as seeding come playoff time, yes, they're in trouble in that regard. But until I see a team not led by Tom Brady take or eliminate the Chiefs out of playoff contention, I'm still not going to make a judgment or a premature judgment and start to point to the Chiefs' demise now because they still have the talent. They still have the quarterback. They still have Andy Reid. They still have the weapons. And I truly believe come playoff time, or at least throughout the course of the season, their fortunes and their outlook will change. Right now, yes, they look like they're in trouble. Right now, yes, the defense is as worse as it's ever been. The offensive line play has not been there. Patrick Mahomes already has the same amount of interceptions in 5 games as he did all of last season with 6. And the Chiefs are spiraling out of control on offense, turn the football over like crazy. Tyreek Hill, it seems that he's dealing with an unspecified knee injury. Travis Kelce, he's had a couple of quiet games. On the defense, like we talked about ad nauseum, it just has not been there. And so, yes, those things will continue. But like I said, come playoff time, I feel like that's when they'll get right. I feel like that's when Patrick Mahomes really will shine the brightest. And so I'm not going to wait to speak on their demise just yet. Right now, it's bad, but as far as the regular season goes, I mean, like you said, you don't put too much stock into the regular season. And so I want to see everything unfold, come playoff time. And that's when I'll start to say, my gosh, like the Chiefs, maybe they're not as good as everybody says they are. Some of the things that's been holding them back, right? Turnovers. Do we honestly expect that to continue? I don't think Patrick Mahomes is going to be throwing 1 or 2 picks every single game. That's just not like him. That's very uncharacteristic of him. Is that going to continue? No. The defense being awful, it's been awful every single year. But the difference between them and other teams that end up going further in the playoffs and have explosive offenses is the fact that they're opportunistic. They play well situationally. They're able to get stops on third down. They're able to turn the football over and give the ball back to their offense. Maybe they trade for a player. Maybe they, pick somebody up that's able to help impact them on defense. And so I'm going to also wait to reserve judgment there. But I think they're only really in trouble as far as the playoff seed goes. Maybe they finish as like I don't know, maybe instead of winning the division, they'll have to, focus on being like a 5th or 6th seed. But even then, I still don't really think they're in trouble. I'll wait till playoff time to really make a call on that.
I'll be that guy, though. Like you, I think they're going to make the playoffs, huh? Like, I don't see a Patrick Mahomes-led, also Andy Reid-led team not making the playoffs. Let me put that up there.
Exactly.
But Steezy, this team is in trouble. Because when they get there, you're not playing bad teams anymore. And the reason I say they're in trouble, I'm seeing too many tendencies that up to week 5 you've not solved. And before, you're correct. This team has never been great defensively. But the issue in past iterations of this team is that they had so much talent that they were able to or get past that. No, this team is not as deep as once before. The offensive line, now that Eric Fisher's gone, this offensive line is not as good anymore. But Steezy, I want to point to the lack of discipline. And now we're seeing things creep into this game. Patrick Mahomes was passed over in this draft multiple times. I think it's the 2017 draft he was taken. Simply because a lot of people felt his backyard style of football play that he had at Texas Tech would not translate to success in the NFL. And understandably so. Andy Reid took a shot on him and, has reined him in somewhat. But we're starting to see a lot of that sloppy play that teams were afraid of, like no-look passes where they don't need, missing some wide open receivers in the middle of the field, taking shots when they're not there. This has now come to the tune of, and I know all of these turnovers are not his fault, but this team, Steezy, has 10 turnovers in their last 4 games. 10.
Yikes.
3 of those 4 games, Steezy, they've had multiple turnovers. And obviously, all 3 of those games have ended up in losses. You're not going to beat anyone turning over the ball multiple times every single game. And no, that would be good if you had a stout defense. But this is now a defense that I think is even worse than before. Their front 7 cannot stop the run at all. I think they've given up more than 115, 20 yards per game rushing at better than 5.2 yards per carry. This is a team now, Steezy, I'm going to shock you. I didn't even know this myself. They have given up more points than they've actually scored this season. They have given up, the only time that they did not give up 30 points this season was to the Cleveland Browns, and that was 29. 29 points is their low point of the entire season defensively. They're turning over the football. They're ill-disciplined. And on top of the ill-discipline now, Steez, right? Part of the reason I no longer like this team is because there's a simple answer to what they're doing on offense. Teams now have decided we're taking away Tyreek Hill over the top. We're not living with those explosive plays anymore. Well, teams not there in Philadelphia. Everyone has put a safety over the top of him and are giving them everything underneath. And if Kansas City was disciplined enough just to take the stuff underneath, Kansas City would probably be, 4-1 in these games. But for whatever reason, whether it's Patrick Mahomes and his ill-discipline, whether it's Andy Reid and I want to say Eric Bieniemy not having the patience to take what defenses are giving them underneath and dink and dunk. Because I can tell you, had Kansas City been willing to live with dink and dunking against the Chargers, against the Ravens, against the Bills last night, they probably wouldn't have 3 losses. but you're seeing drop passes, you're seeing ill-advised throws. I don't know where this ill-discipline starts or where it ends, but Steezy, what I have seen on both sides of the football, not being able to stop the run. Oh, and on top of that, not being able to stop the run, Steezy. This is a team that is giving up 9.3 pass yards per play. 9.3. That's basically a first down every single pass attempt. Who are you going to beat? And when the soft part of their schedule comes up, because make no mistake, but you start with the Browns, the Ravens, the Chargers, and last night the Bills. That is a very, very rough start to the season. And granted, yes, when the soft part of their schedule comes, they're going to roll over those teams. But Steve, those 4 teams I just called, you are going to have to see at least one of them in the playoffs. You can't stop the run, so it means you're going to have problems against both the Ravens and the Browns, the 2 best rushing attacks in all of football. Justin Herbert and the Chargers are in your division. And right now, Steezy, I believe the Bills will end up getting that number 1 seed. So if you're going to have to get to the Super Bowl, you're going to have to go through Buffalo. I don't know about you, Steezy, but I don't like what I'm seeing in Kansas City. They're going to get the playoffs, but I don't know who they're going to beat when they get there. Sorry.
No, you know what? To your point, Kansas City's actually lucky they're not 1-4. If Cleveland hadn't fumbled away that game, week 1, if Baker Mayfield hadn't thrown that interception, if their punter hadn't made a stupid mistake, the Browns would have won, and Kansas City right now would be sitting at 1-4. So, you share a lot of valid points, and I wholeheartedly, for me, I guess a lot of this really just derives from my complete, amount of faith in Patrick Mahomes and his talent. I mean, they've been able to weather the storm before. I know the circumstances are a lot different now. I just think that, look, they'll figure it out. But to me, it's just really crazy it's crazy to see the parallels between my Seattle Seahawks and the Kansas City Chiefs. Both teams are obviously 2-3. Both teams have elite quarterbacks. Both teams have abysmal defenses. Both teams have quarterbacks and offensive schemes that don't really feature the quick passing game or the dink and dunks, the short passes. Both teams feature quarterbacks who's always trying to push the ball down the field, look for the, superhero, the magic plays. And it's crazy to see the parallels. I saw a tweet. It was talking about how, I've said this before, but the fact that Seattle still has the same record, this still holds true. But, a lot of Seattle fans didn't anticipate having the same record as Kansas City through 5 games. And so I don't know if that's something I could take solace in, or if that's something that's maybe a sign of trouble. But yeah, I don't know. Kansas City, they're definitely in trouble in the short term. And you add in the fact that Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who hasn't really been that good, but that's their starting running back. He's going to miss the next 3 to 4 weeks. And so who knows? Maybe they bring in, a veteran option, Todd Gurley, Adrian Peterson. Maybe they trade for a Marlon Mack. Who knows? But definitely in the short term, they're in major trouble. And if they don't get that fixed, we might not even be talking playoffs for them. We'll see.
And they're in a tough division because they still have the Raiders to play. I told your guy, Marcus, about the illegitimacy of those Denver Broncos. I told him that they were frauds. Mm-hmm. And they only beat up on a very weak schedule, and you're coming to find out. But they may be the 3rd best team in their own division, and I don't know.
Quite possibly. Yeah, quite possibly.
Staying in the AFC, though, we had another, or at least a good game over there, that being the Browns against the Chargers. Went down to the last possession, and the Chargers eat that out 47-42. So, Steezy, I'll ask you, what was your biggest takeaway from that victory or from that game altogether?
Man, that game was phenomenal, full of fireworks, exactly the type of display of offense that, all fans want to see. That being said, my biggest takeaway from that game is I think we might have a new top 5 quarterback in Justin Herbert. And the way he's slinging dimes, the way he's utilizing Mike Williams, the way that he's able to just lead this team to so many different drives, game-winning drives, game-saving drives, the sort of plays that he's able to make. 4 total touchdowns. I have him on one of my fantasy teams, and so I was able to reap the benefits, of his spectacular performance. Austin Eckler, oh my gosh. I mean, look, this team is ahead of schedule because of Justin Herbert. And who knows, maybe he makes a run at MVP. I mean, we're talking about Josh Allen, Dak Prescott, Matthew Stafford, Kyler Murray. What about Justin Herbert? I mean, this team, like, I think you or Marcus mentioned it, but they should have won against Dallas, in week 2. And so we could be talking about a team that's 5-0. And that's not all because, but mostly because of Justin Herbert. And so I think we might have a new entry into the top 5 of NFL quarterbacks. And if there's a takeaway that I could point out towards the Browns or about the Browns, it's they got to get rid of OBJ. Look, Cleveland put up, what was it, over 500 yards of offense? And you know how many OBJ had? 20. 2 catches for 20 yards. And the rest of your team had over 500. And we're talking about a guy who used to be one of the best receivers in all of football. He hasn't been that in 4 or 5 years now. I understand your quarterback is dealing with the partially torn labrum. And so, maybe we can cut him a little bit of slack. But OBJ himself has been dealing with the torn labrum, he said, for the last 10 years. I don't know if that's been playing a part in his inability to be the receiver that he once was. But, I mean, when your team is putting up 500 yards of offense and you're supposed to be the superstar wideout and you only put up 20, you have other weaknesses on the football team. I feel like they could really use OBJ as trade bait. They have a lot of options. They have a lot of depth at wide receiver. They're stacked at running back. Their offensive line is great. Their quarterback isn't. And they have a wide receiver that doesn't fit the team's plans. They don't even plan on featuring him. That chemistry just is not there with him and Baker Mayfield. And another takeaway one more time. I mean, another quick takeaway from the Browns is I think Baker Mayfield isn't going to be the guy that takes his team to the promised land. I mean, I don't care if he has a healthy labrum or whatnot, but he's just not going to be that guy. I don't see it. Honestly, I don't.
I hate you, Steezy, because you just took my big grand entry. Like, I was coming here now to show off this point, and I really wish the only Cleveland Browns fan I know was on the show. He was supposed to come on, but work kept him away, and we do mean you, Peyton Doyle. I hope you're watching, Peyton. But I'm going to get to that Baker Mayfield point because I'm glad that you said that, and I'm not the only crazy person in town. But like you, I also believe that we're looking at a top 5 quarterback of a superstar. I can't even say future, because Justin Herbert is right here, right now. Like, there is no doubt about it. And you can make the point that Justin Herbert, through 5 weeks, maybe Josh Allen, is the best quarterback in all of football. I mean, not just the numbers, the insane numbers he's putting up, but Steezy, his clutch factor, like, this guy has been scoring at rates in the 4th quarter. Like, this guy would not go away. It doesn't make mistakes in the 4th quarter. This dude is really good. And the team that has to be kicking themselves right now, the Miami Dolphins, like, here are stuck with damaged goods in Tua Tagovailoa, who probably is not even a starter in this league, and you passed up on the next best thing. Like, I think I was reading a stat somewhere, like, through the first 5 games in his, I want to say, first 5 games in his sophomore season, then the only people that had more touchdowns than his 14, all 3 of them won MVPs in that sophomore season. And those 3 quarterbacks would be Patrick Mahomes, Kurt Warner, and Dan Marino. Like, so I mean, geez, all right.
That's great company.
That's extremely great company. And like, so you mentioned MVP. Well, he's putting up numbers, and the history would suggest that Justin Herbert is going to go on to win the MVP if he continues like this. As I said, the only quarterbacks who had more or as many touchdowns in their sophomore season through 5 games, Kurt Warner, Dan Marino, and indeed Patrick Mahomes. My only issue with this Chargers team is their front 7. Talented, but my word, if the Kansas City Chiefs are bad at stopping the run, guess who's actually worse? And it's these Chargers. And sure, when you play the Browns, the numbers are going to look exaggerated because we know the 2-headed monster that is Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. And that offensive line is arguably, if not the best in all of football. But even before that, I think they were giving up like 6 yards per rush through the first 3 games this season. That front 7 really needs to find a way to stop the run, because at some point you're probably going to run into the Browns, the Ravens, or indeed the Buffalo Bills. But the ground point you want to make them, and before I get ripped apart by Cleveland fans, let me just say this quickly. Baker Mayfield played absolutely well in that game. Like, there's no doubt. You couldn't have asked for more for the quarterback that is Baker Mayfield right now. And I'm not suggesting or hinting that Baker Mayfield is the reason they lost that game. Obviously, when you give up 47 points and you scored 42, you had 0 turnovers, you said 500 yards of offense. Clearly, your quarterback is not the problem. That being said, Steezy, I agree with you, and I said this over and over again. Baker Mayfield is not the quarterback that's going to get you to the Super Bowl. And yes, he had a great game, but again, look at the 2 losses they've had so far, Steezy. One against Kansas City, one against LA, and again, these are not 2 easy destinations to play in. But Baker Mayfield, at the end of that game, both games, had the ball in his hands. Could not march them down. Not even a field goal in either scenario. And I mean, granted, they think they need touchdowns in both scenarios. Could not march them down the field. And there's a reason for that, Steezy. Kevin Stefanski does an absolutely tremendous job hiding Baker Mayfield or hiding his deficiencies. When you have a 1 drive to win a game in a 2-minute scenario, can't hide your quarterback anymore. You're not going to be able to run the football because the clock is no longer on your side. So you can't hand it off to Nick Chubb. You can't hand it off to Kareem Hunt. The defense knows what you're doing. And clearly, defenses are not afraid of Baker Mayfield. Kevin Stefanski cutting the field in half, limiting his reads. That is not going to work in 2-minute scenarios. And we saw that against the Chiefs. We saw it again against the Chargers. And again, I'm not saying that Baker Mayfield was the reason they lost both games, but he's not the reason he certainly didn't win it for them either. Mm-hmm. And we can go over and over. Let's look at team Justin Herbert. The game on the line late in the game. The Chargers knew they could put the ball in Justin Herbert's hand winning the game. Same thing, the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. Even Lamar Jackson, that everyone likes to criticize and say that he's not active with the football, against those same Chiefs. John Harbaugh put the ball in Lamar Jackson's hand. He single-handedly won that game outside of the turnover they caused, of course. Because John Harbaugh knew he could trust Lamar Jackson to go down the field and win that game. Baker Mayfield is not that guy. And further to this point, Steezy, the eventual AFC playoff field, the Cleveland Browns will have the worst quarterback in that field. When you look, Kansas City Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, the Chargers with Justin Herbert, the Ravens, Lamar Jackson, Titans, Ryan Tannehill. I'm sure I'm missing a quarterback. That's the Raiders get here.
If you haven't already said.
Oh, sorry. Buffalo Bills, Josh Allen. Raiders, possibly with Derek Carr. Whenever the Cleveland Browns get into the AFC playoff field, because the Steelers are not going to make it, so you can't tee off on Big Ben that you did before. You will have the worst quarterback. I know Cleveland is in a predicament because, Steezy, they have a contract situation looming with Baker Mayfield. If this guy is not able to win you games at the end of regular season, then what is to say about playoff games? What are you going to pay this man? What is this man's worth if your whole game plan is to hide the deficiencies of your quarterback? What is he worth?
And Justin, I might even argue that I might take Joe Burrow over Baker Mayfield as well. I mean, Joe Burrow is making throws.
You're joking here, right?
Actually, no, I will. I will. I mean, Joe Burrow is capable of leading his team to, late season game-winning drives. He almost did against the Green Bay Packers, against your Packers. And Mason Crosby almost bailed him out a few of those times. But, he was finally able to come through. And I expected that because he's done that for you guys time and time again. And so I've seen games in which Mason Crosby's missed kicks like crazy. And, he always ends up coming through. And so, Joe Burrow, I mean, he's – I don't think you mentioned his name, but he's yet another quarterback in the AFC that, I'd easily not rather have over Baker Mayfield any day of the week. And I'm actually glad Cleveland didn't extend Baker Mayfield. You know, they didn't over-exaggerate and overreact to what happened last year, and they weren't just like, oh, you know what, you had a great year, you know, under our new coach of the year. We'll give you, you know, the money that you're asking for. I'm glad I had reservations about that because now it's starting to actually show that they made the right decision. And it's rare that you see this in teams giving up on their first round, you know, quarterbacks, especially coming off of a rookie contract. But I mean, this team should be Super Bowl caliber. It's really the quarterback that's holding them back, and it's not because you know he's turning the ball over, but it's exactly what you said. It's because of the things that he can't do, the things that he's not capable of doing, and that's what's holding this team back. The things that he can't do, the plays in the playbook that he can't help to actually be called. I mean, he has a lot of deficiencies, and so you know you can't always hide that, even if you have elite talent surrounding him.
And please, again, Cleveland fans, I know there are a lot of Baker fans and Cleveland fans are going to rip me for this take. I am not suggesting that Baker Mayfield was the reason they lost that game against the Chargers. Like, clearly, when you give up 47 points and did not turn over the football, that's not on your offense. But again, like Steezy pointed out, and again here, as I showed, 2 potential game-winning drives, and your quarterback could not deliver, and either of them could not even get you past the midfield. That shows you something, like, because like you can no longer hide your quarterback in this scenario. And I want people to understand the reason Baker has not been turning over the football is because Kevin Stefanski hides him. Kevin Stefanski takes the ball out of his hands and said, I'm going to trust Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. And I mean, if you have running backs of that caliber, of course you should. Like, that's the strength of this Cleveland Browns roster, that they're running atop their offensive line. But at some point, Baker Mayfield is going to have to make enough plays to beat the other quarterbacks that we've mentioned. And clearly you feel the same way, Steezy. This quarterback is not good enough to do that. Well, I mean, unfortunately, this is making for a boring show because I was anticipating that Peyton was on and he would have disagreed with me and we'd have gone back and forth. But we've been in the AFC for too long, so now we're going to shift to the NFC. And we are seeing now a ton of good NFC powers, at least by record-wise. You have the Arizona Cardinals unbeaten still at 5-0, and a slew of other NFC teams at 4-1, namely my Packers, the Dallas Cowboys, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the Los Angeles Rams. Steezy, I'm going to give you the impossible task because you know how we do it on the show. I like to put people in the hot seat. Rank these 5 NFC contenders.
Okay, so I'm gonna start off with number 5, and I got the Dallas Cowboys. Man, their team looks complete. You know, defense, I think they have right now the reigning, or who should be the favorite for defense. His ball tracking skills, his coverage is, you know, he's gotten a lot stickier there. He's becoming more of a shutdown type of corner. He's the centerpiece of that defense. Michael Parsons, the rookie linebacker, has been better than advertised. Dan Quinn has been coaching that unit up extremely well. The offense is extremely balanced. You know, they can win one week with Dak Prescott's arm. The next week, they can win with the 2-headed tandem of Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard. The offensive line, while not as elite as it once was, is still performing above average. And so they have a lot of things working in their favor. The one thing that isn't is their head coach, and I think that's what's really keeping them down these rankings. Fifth in the entire NFC through the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season. I don't think anybody had that besides Dallas Cowboys fans. So, you know, you can only ask for so much. But for right now, Mike McCarthy is really what's holding them back. They're at number 5 on my NFC power rankings, I guess. Number 4, I got the LA Rams. I know they're coming off a victory against my Seattle Seahawks on Thursday Night Football, but it wasn't very convincing. For those of you guys that watched the game in the first half, Seattle was outright dominating LA. To that point, LA had 3 points going up against a defense that was the worst in football. They was only able to muster 3 points against my defense. I mean, come on, only 3 points. Matthew Stafford had a pick. He was overthrowing receivers. He was missing receivers left and right. He took a sack. He looked absolutely rattled. LA was 0 for 5 on third down, and they finished the game 2 for 10. That wasn't a very convincing victory. And when Russell Wilson got injured, Geno Smith comes in. Seattle still has a chance to win the football game. As soon as Russell Wilson went out.
I still scored a touchdown. It was shocking.
Still scored a touchdown and a field goal. and came close to going on another drive. I mean, I know it ended in an INT. There was a lot of contact there. Who knows? I'm not going to try to debate, the non-call there. But Geno Smith led 2 scoring drives, a touchdown and a field goal. And like I was just about to say, as soon as Russell Wilson got injured, I was just like, oh, it's over. All right, we don't have a chance. And then Geno Smith comes in, starts at the 2-yard line, and goes for 5 for 5, 98 yards on his first drive since 2017. And for me, I was actually thinking about switching around the Cowboys and the Rams, but just because, the Rams are coming off a victory in Seattle in a very hostile environment against a divisional opponent, I gave them the slight edge there, but I'm not at all convinced by the LA Rams. I mean, Matthew Stafford, I know he injured one of his fingers in the first half, and maybe that led to, his abysmal performance in the first half, but it wasn't very convincing. So for right now, I got the Rams at number 4. Number 3, I got the reigning defending Super Bowl champions in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're coming off yet another blowout, at the hands of the Miami Dolphins. Tom Brady, I mean, my gosh, 5 touchdowns, almost 500 yards passing. I'm in 15 fantasy leagues. I had him in a couple of those. He had almost 50 fantasy points, and that single-handedly led me to a couple of victories. And so, I mean, he was missing Gronk, and yet they were still able to dismantle that pretty much that stingy Dolphins secondary. I mean, they have Xavier Howard, Byron Jones. They're well coached on defense by Brian Flores, and yet Tom Brady was able to pick them apart. You would have thought that Brian Flores would have been able to, maybe use some of his knowledge against Tom Brady, but that was the furthest thing that happened. I got Tampa Bay number 3.
I thought they would have used or tried to use some of New England's game plan, but that did not
exactly.
work.
You would think, a Bill Belichick disciple would take a page out of his mentor's book. I mean, you see your former head coach holding, the Tom Brady led Bucs to under 20 points. You're not going to take a page or 2 out of that playbook? I guess not. I mean, he said he's his own man. So, number 2, I got your Green Bay Packers. You mentioned this early in the show. I mean, they've looked the furthest thing from, what happened in week 1. I mean, I think we all talked about it. That was more of a blip on the radar. That was really a byproduct of them not being interested, a byproduct of them having gone through all that drama in the offseason, a byproduct of them not having had any preseason and a lot of training camp reps. And now, they're starting to get all that together. You guys recently signed Jalen Smith, and so hopefully that, addresses some of the holes on defense. I know Zadarius Smith has been out for a while, and so, you guys almost had Stephon Gilmore too. I mean, I can recall Devontae Adams commenting on a picture talking about call me, and then, next thing you know, the Panthers end up swooping in.
The Patriots are so disgusting, right? Like, they use that as leverage just to trade him because they were releasing him. And they use the information knowing that he was going to come to the Packers, come to us, as leverage to get the Panthers to give up something for Stephon Gilmore. We had him.
You guys did. I was just like, oh, my gosh. As soon as Jair Alexander gets healthy and Stephon Gilmore gets healthy, then you guys have probably the best, DB duo in football. I mean, I'm kind of glad in a way that didn't happen. But, like I said, you guys are coming off a very tough, a great win over a gritty Bengals team. It shouldn't have gone to overtime. Mason Crosby should have made kicks that he definitely is used to making. But like I said earlier, he's also he's been in that situation before. I've seen a couple of games in which he's missed kick after kick after kick, and I'm just like, why do the Packers still employ him as their kicker? And at the end of the day, he comes in and saves the day from his own mistakes, by making the game winner. And so the offense is looking like it's humming. Devontae Adams had a career high receiving yards of 206. You guys are getting A.J. Dillon involved. The offensive line is starting to pick up its play. Defense, hasn't been really as bad since Zadarius Smith went out. And so, you guys are looking good. Definitely got to be the second best team in the NFC, if not the best. But by virtue of their record, I got to go with the Arizona Cardinals at number 1. They're also coming off a pretty impressive victory over a divisional opponent against the San Francisco 49ers. Granted, Trey Lance, oh, man, he didn't look very good as a passer. But he did, do a lot of damage with his legs. So the Cardinals kind of had it easy there. They were going up against an overmatched opponent, an overmatched quarterback. And, through 5 games of the season, they stay undefeated. And for that, they had to sit atop my NFC power rankings. But I don't know. Who knows? Seattle went 5-0 last year, and they ended up going on a second-half slump. I'm not saying the Cardinals are last year's Seahawks, but I don't want to get super excited. But for now, they are undefeated. And so for that, they get the number 1 spot in my NFC power rankings.
I love that, Steezy. Only because you put my Packers at number 2 where I'm going to do it the flip side. I'm going to start 1, and it has to be the Cardinals because They're unbeaten. And not just because they're unbeaten, but they've beaten some good squads, like to beat the previously undefeated Rams in SoFi. And convincingly, that was a beatdown. I think it was at one point 30, I want to say 35 or 38-13 at some point.
Yes.
In SoFi.
With a few minutes to go in the fourth quarter.
That, before they scored a touchdown to make the score a little bit more respectable, they beat them on both sides, not just Kyler Murray running around the field, but as you mentioned previously on the show, they got, like, I want to say almost 200 yards rushing, if not 200 yards rushing in that football game to show you that they have a balanced offense. And that Rams offense that we saw with Cooper Kupp looking almost unstoppable through the first 3 or 4 weeks. They held that in check again until the end when they gave up that touchdown when the game was basically all but decided. Yeah, like, wow. Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods has looked like so far up to that point as the best wide receiver tandem, or at least one of the best wide receiver tandems in all of football. Cardinals completely snuffed that out. So I'd want to see, just because of record and the teams that they've beaten, I think they went into Tennessee, got a victory, and they've looked pretty impressive. And as you said, divisional games, those victories are very, very impressive because, as you would know, you just take those records away, especially when the NFC West is playing each other. Granted, as you said, Trey Lance, I can see why he's not the starter. Like, he has a lot of fine-tuning to do, a lot of developing as a passer. And clearly they built the offense around him running around the park. But still, to beat San Fran, that is no easy victory despite their 2-3 record. So for how the Arizona Cardinals have looked record-wise and the teams they've beaten, I think they're the default number one. Now, here's my surprise pick, Steezy. I have all the rest at number 2 together. I just can't pick a team apart from the others. Like, you talk about the Rams. Well, the Arizona Cardinals completely destroyed them in SoFi. And up to that point, the Rams had looked like the best team in all of football. And then the Rams then turn around and go at your Seahawks against a very, very bad defense. Sorry to say this, Steezy, but at that point, a very bad defense. And
I agree.
It was only like if Russell Wilson doesn't get that finger injury, who knows what happens in that game. But, then they pull away from there. And then even then, as you mentioned, Geno Smith gave them a run for their money. And they can't tell you the last time Geno Smith started a game, 2017?
2017 with the Giants.
I wanted to see maybe the Buccaneers, but, the Buccaneers were given all their worth against Dallas Cowboys on ring night, on the opener. And then, the Rams that have looked bad in the last 2 weeks gave them a complete beatdown as well. And then granted, Gronk didn't play in the game, but they throw out that absolute stinker in New England. Of course, there's a lot of, emotions to that game or whatever not. But reality of the game, you shouldn't be giving up so many points to that New England team, nor should you be only scoring 19, because you still have Mike Evans, you still have still have Chris Godwin, you still have your running backs Leonard Fournette and
Justin,
Jones.
don't forget the Patriots almost lost to the Texans too.
And this is a Patriots team that got blown out by the Saints, who have been subsequently blown out by the Panthers and lost to the Giants. And as you said, they almost lost to the Texans. So that win in New England, I'm putting some question marks on that. Then, if there is a team that I may want to put a clear-cut number 2, this is going to shock you, it's not even mine. It's the Dallas Cowboys. But again, I question that game against Tampa Bay. Granted, I thought Tampa Bay at that time was the best team in all of football. The opener, obviously, defending champs, returning all 22 starters on either side of football. Dallas played a close one there, then went into SoFi, won that game. And, I thought Dallas has been pretty steady in what I've seen, especially on both sides of football. Dan Quinn has completely revitalized that defense. Trayvon Diggs, as you're correct, if the season ended today, Trayvon Diggs has to be Defensive Player of the Year. 6 interceptions in 5 games. looking like he should be wearing 21 and not number 7 in memory of Deion Sanders. They can run the football. They have that 3-headed wide receiver monster when Michael Gallup returns. This is a very, very solid football team, and I'm not going to pin them down too hard for that loss in Tampa Bay. Then there are my Packers, and I know the win against the Bengals is not that convincing, but I think this Bengals team is a lot better than people are giving them credit for, and I think this Bengals team might get into the playoffs, but give people a run for their money, especially considering they have a last-place schedule like they're working with. And why I like our victory in Cincinnati so much. We are missing so many Pro Bowlers due to injury. You mentioned there was no Jair Alexander. There was no Zadarius Smith. There was no David Bakhtiari. There's no Elton Jenkins. Those are 4 Pro Bowlers, 2 of which are all pros. And then there's no Marquez Valdez. We are ravaged through injury. And we're putting our best corner in the game was a rookie first rounder in Eric Stokes. At some point, then we're going to get back those players. So I want to say that this team is going to be even better served. But I still can't forgive the Packers, unlike most people, for that 38-3 loss to the Saints. Like that's inexplicable, especially considering that we have not seen that Saints team since. That's a Saints team that got blown up by Carolina, who has since lost some bad games. That is a Saints team who has lost to the New York Giants. The New York Giants for their only thing. So I still have to hold that against the Packers. And here's the worst and the biggest troubling stats that I can say of Green Bay, which I think twice about making them the second best team in the NFC. We have allowed teams in the red zone 13 times. And all 13 times the opposing team has scored a touchdown. Each of those 13 possessions that the opponents have gotten into the red zone, we have given up a touchdown. That cannot bode well, especially when we still have not played the majority of the NFC West. We've not matched up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Thankfully, we won't see them until the playoffs. But yeah, that does not bode well against actual good teams. You can't give up 13 touchdowns in 13 red zone visits from the opposition. So, Steezy, to make a long story short, I have the Arizona Cardinals and then a bunched up number 2 spot. I have no idea who's better than who right now.
Yeah, I mean, I had a hard time, putting these teams in order. Like I said, I wanted to put Dallas above LA. I'm kind of hesitant about putting LA at number 4, but then, like you said, they had that blowout against the reigning defending Super Bowl champions, the Green Bay Packers. I mean, even though I'm trying to make it seem as if it's a blip on the radar, that did still happen, against New Orleans Saints in Week 1. So yeah, there's a lot of things that really don't separate these teams, and they all have the same record as well, 4-1. So it really is hard to kind of put this team here, this team there. It's to me, it's fluid.
I don't think there's much that separates them. I don't even know if the Arizona Cardinals are that much above the rest of the NFC field.
No,
and I think
not.
And more that they play within their own division, we're going to find out, because I don't see them going unbeaten against the entire NFC West. I just don't see that happening. So at some point, I think all those 5 teams that we just mentioned, I think, Steezy, is going to be a battle royale. And as I said on this show already with you on it, here's my shocker, and I'm not saying they're the best team in the NFC, but I do expect the Dallas Cowboys to get that lone seed, that lone playoff bye, the number 1 seed, simply because, one, they don't have a first place schedule like a lot of that we just mentioned, like Packers have. In fact, actually, of the 5 teams, the only team that has a first place schedule is me, because all the other 4 teams didn't win their division last year. And they play in the NFC East. My word, like, those are 6 give me wins. Like, if you want 6 easy wins, well, where else getting them than the Philadelphia Eagles, the New York Giants, and the Washington football team that is playing without an actual quarterback at the moment. So for that reason, because of schedule alone, I have the Dallas Cowboys to actually eke out the number 1 seed.
Wow. I mean, I thought in 2021, that'd be a crazy statement, and I'd look at you crazy. But seeing as how well the Dallas Cowboys have been playing, can't really say the same.
Well, who has not been playing well? Unfortunately, Steezy, I'm going to have to bring this up. Seattle Seahawks and San Francisco 49ers, who are now without their starting quarterbacks for, I think before Niners are welcoming back Jimmy Garoppolo for the Colts game is possible. But you are going to be without Russell Wilson for, I want to say, 6 to 8 weeks with that dislocated or broken middle finger. In your mind, though, then, Steezy, can you and your NFC rivals still make a playoff push out of that tough NFC West?
Niners, and with the Niners, I'm going to say no. I know before the season, Guru was on the show, I was on the show, and I think Dwayne was on the show, and I was talking about how I felt like San Fran was the biggest threat to Seattle in the NFC West. Turns out they might be the least, the smallest threat of them all. I mean, I didn't anticipate Trey Lance to be this raw. We all knew he was raw. We all knew he needed work to be done. We all knew that he needed, some refinement at the game's most important position as far as being like a pure quarterback. Because he reminds me of a young Josh Allen, if not just a little worse, as far as, his being so erratic when it comes to, throwing different passes. He's wildly inaccurate. And so good thing San Fran does have a bye. And I think that once, their bye week has rolled past, come week 7, I think Jimmy G will be back as a starting quarterback. And I don't know if I really have a lot of faith in Jimmy G. They just placed George Kittle on IR, so he's going to miss a minimum of 3 games / 3 weeks. The bye week does help, and so he's not going to miss as much time with the bye week looming. But the offense just looks I don't know if stagnant is the right word, but I just don't know about the offense. Like Kyle Shanahan, we've all been raving about him as this genius, right? Well, where's all that brilliance? Where has it
Remember,
been?
I warned you, and you
did.
Guru were on this show, and I told you he is not a genius. He's just using his father's offense. His father's a genius. I warned y'all. I said he is just using what he knows of his father's offense. And to your point, quickly, not to cross you, sorry, I'll let you go back to your point. Trey Lance apparently has a sprained left knee, and he too can be missing some time. So Jimmy Garoppolo better be able to stand up firm because they're not going to have their backup. But go ahead, Steve.
Dude, that's crazy too. Probably like 20 minutes before the show, and I was like, "What? Trey Lance is injured too?" Kyle Shanahan talked about how it's like a 1 or 2 week thing, and so it's nothing serious. But even after their bye week, he's probably not going to be ready to play. So Jimmy G, by default, is going to have to step in as a starter. But seeing as that he was close to playing against the Cardinals, he should be good to go after the bye. But Jimmy G just doesn't look the same. The offensive line hasn't been playing nearly up to par. Brandon Ayuk, I mean, where has he gone? My gosh, last year he was all over the place. And now I'm starting to think that's a byproduct of nobody being healthy. And somebody had to put up numbers. Somebody had to put up yards. Somebody had to catch the football. George Kittle wasn't there. Deebo Samuel was always getting injured. And so, somebody had to do it. And so I don't know if I'm going to categorize his lack of being himself as a byproduct of, he had to be the only guy catching passes, or maybe he's going through a sophomore slump, but he's not what he was last year. George Kittle, even when he was healthy, he hasn't been the same threat at tight end. He just doesn't look nearly as good. Deebo, now good news for them. Deebo's taking over. He looks like a legitimate number 1 to me. But that defense also
He's
is just
on my
the middle of the
fantasy
pack.
team. Thank God, and he has been winning me games every single week. Oh my gosh.
Oh, yeah. I don't have him in too many. I have him in 1 or 2, but I've been reaping the benefits as well. And so, I totally feel you there. They do have a bright future with him as their number 1 guy, but I feel like just across the board, Kyle Shanahan and his coaching, the defense just being middle of the pack as opposed to being elite, all the injuries that they're having to deal with, there's no way I can see this team making a run towards the playoffs, especially in the vaunted NFC West. And now they actually are the ones who sit last place in the NFC West by virtue of the tie that Seattle has over them. And so I don't see how they climb out of it. I mean, the injuries and everything else, I don't see it. As for Seattle, I have a little bit more faith and hope in Seattle. I'm not going to sit here and say definitively that, oh, yeah, we're going to make the playoffs for sure. I think we're going to have to, scratch and claw our way up there. But I still think we can. Call me an optimist, if you will. But the latest reports about Russell Wilson have been he might just miss up to a month, and seeing as how he is this Iron Man, seeing as how he's as tough as nails, seeing as how back in 2016. He was playing with a sprained MCL and an ankle injury. He's never missed a practice. He's only missed practice to attend a funeral. That's happened once or twice in the span of 10 years. Never missed a start, knock on wood. And so I'm not going to be the type of guy to rush another guy to come back from injury faster. But just knowing Russell Wilson, knowing the competitor that he is, knowing how tough he is, knowing how bad he wants to win, knowing the type of situation that the Seattle Seahawks are in, he's going to do everything in his power to come back in 3 weeks. And I'm not going to sit here and say that all of these next couple of opponents are easy, because nothing is easy in the NFL unless it's against the Jags or the Jets. And I know their offense looks somewhat revitalized, seeing as how, Big Ben was slinging some passes, but I'm not big believers of that yet. And so Seattle has Pittsburgh, right, on the dock, Sunday Night Football. After that, the New Orleans Saints, who have been Jekyll and Hyde because they've had dominating performances and they've been alternating that with awful performances. And so we don't know what kind of team we're going to get once they come to Seattle on Monday Night Football come week 8. I'm not saying that's a gimme, but Seattle has a chance to win that game at home. And then after that, Jaguars. Really? And so that's 3 weeks, right? The 4th week is week 9. Seattle has a bye. And so come week 10, when we go up against you guys, Russell Wilson could possibly come back. If not then against the Arizona Cardinals in week 11, he's definitely going to be back by then if he's not already back before. And so, like I said, and I'm going to say it again, I'm not saying these games are gimmies, but Seattle definitely has a realistic shot of beating the Steelers, of beating the Saints, of beating the Jags, and going into the bye 3-0 with Geno Smith as their starting quarterback. That being said, if Seattle does end up making that happen, they'll sit at 6-3. And so I still think that, Russell Wilson will be able to come back in time to be able to lead them to, the sort of heroics that he's used to doing throughout the course of his career. And, we see the Panthers being exposed. We see, and we're not sold on other teams in the NFC. We definitely don't see another team in the NFC East coming out, aside from the Dallas Cowboys. NFC North, Minnesota might be a factor, but there's no other team besides the Green Bay that's, ticketed for a playoff spot. And obviously, we have to deal with our own division. But like I just said, there's concerns with the LA Rams. There's still legitimacy questions about the Cardinals. There's injuries with the Niners. The Panthers are getting exposed. And so Seattle still most definitely has a shot, only if, though, they're able to go at least 2-1 or 3-0 in the next 4 weeks.
So, like, you all start in Niners, huh? This bye week couldn't have come at a better time for them at all. So they do get back Jimmy G for the Colts game. And, I think that they should use that I think they should win that game, because this is not the Indianapolis Colts team that I predicted. I thought this is the team that was going to challenge for the AFC South. And it could still very well do it after the Tennessee Titans lost the game to the New York Jets. Who the hell does that? But this Colts team is not the same Colts team I thought was going to contend for the AFC South and for a playoff spot in the conference itself. And they still have some division games after that. But they need to get back some players healthy, and I think this bye is going to help them tremendously. I'll put some to be decided with San Francisco 49ers. Mm-hmm. I'm actually more concerned on the other side of the football more so than you. Like, their offense is one thing, but what has been their trademark during the Kyle Shanahan time has actually been their defense. And I think losing Robert Saleh has been a blow that they have not been able to recover from, because this defense has looked absolutely terrible. Like, not to sound like, a big homer here, but the Packers are accustomed, like, what has been the house of horrors for us has been going into San Fran against that defense. It's not really been their offense. Like, we have not been able to do anything against their defense. And as you watch, like, we comfortably handled them. Like, we went up early. They came back roaring, obviously, and then we still marched down the field easily. Like, 2 quick throws, a field goal, and that was the end of that. Like, we comfortably moved the ball up and down the field on that defense. And that's a defense whose front seven we've not been able to handle previously. And our offensive line was missing 3 Pro Bowlers from last year. As you would know, our Pro Bowl center is now in LA. Elton Jenkins, I don't think, played in that game. And David Bakhtiari, as everyone knows, is on IR. And other than the first series, Nick Bosa was not to be seen of after that. This defense is not being the same defense that we have seen that has caused so many problems over the last 2-3 seasons. And it is not really to do with the injuries, I think, more so than Robert Saleh's departure for New York. I'll still put it to be decided on San Fran. Know your team. And I'll agree with you, Steezy. I think your team has the better of the two. Or potentially you have an easier path to the playoffs than the San Francisco 49ers, simply because of the three teams you just called. You have the Saints, you have the Steelers, and you have the Jaguars. Those are three very, very winnable games, especially if Geno Smith is playing like the Geno Smith we saw at the end of that Rams Thursday night game. I think those are three winnable games, in my estimation, to keep up with the rest of the NFC West, namely the Arizona Cardinals and the LA Rams. You're going to have to win all three of those games. You definitely can't lose to the Jaguars and the Steelers and hope to make up that kind of ground. You have to win those three games. And then, you get the bye and return to Green Bay. That should be a very, very good game. Our two teams have had a rivalry. For teams that are not in the same division, we've had a rivalry over the past, 5-6 seasons. All these games have come down to the wire. And then even after that, I think you have the Cardinals and then another winnable game against the Washington football team. So I'll have to say, in my estimation, if you go 4-0 against Washington, Jacksonville, New Orleans, and Pittsburgh, I think it's very, very possible to get you wild card spot, especially when you look. The NFC East is not sending another team to the playoffs. No, that's not happening. No. Especially as Washington, as I warned y'all, there's a reason Taylor Heineke was not drafted. There's a reason. So I don't see the NFC East sending another team. The Chicago Bears are shockingly enough 3-2. Surprisingly enough, and I don't know what happened against the Raiders, but I can take a guess and we'll get into that just shortly. They have a game against us next week and we'll see how that goes, or this upcoming week, to be more precise. The Vikings are still, I think, 2-3, and I don't know really what's going on there. I can see, as I said, it comes down to y'all making sure to go 4-0 against Steelers, the Jaguars, the Saints, and the Washington football team. We just talked about the Raiders, Steezy, and this is how we'll close out the show. And there were some disturbing comments coming from none other than their head coach, John Rudin, when he was an analyst 10 years ago with ESPN. And typically I don't want to read this stuff, but for the sake of transparency, and we're talking about this, I'll read the comments that he made about executive director of the NFLPA, DeMaurice Smith, the email he wrote. And I think he said, DeMaurice Smith has lips the size of Michelin tires, and I can only take that as a racial connotation towards, black people having big lips. Steezy, I'll ask you then, in light of those comments, should the NFL or the Las Vegas Raiders discipline head coach John Rudin?
Definitely. I think it's only the right thing to do. My issue is that if somebody is racist, right, behind closed doors, I'm just not sure that punishing them by handing out a fine or by suspending them for a certain amount of games, that's not going to stop him from being racist. If he's a racist person at heart, that's not going to stop him from doing that or from continuing to do that towards other people of color. And so while it is the right thing to do, no, I don't believe so. If there's anything that's going to come close to even maybe thinking them, or if there's anything that comes close to even potentially possibly changing, his racist doing, maybe it's firing him. But because they're off to such a great start, I just don't know if that's what's going to help them win football games. I don't know if you do that now. I think the Bears was because of all the distractions and stuff that had taken place. I mean, the Raiders should have won that football game, plain and simple. But those guys weren't locked in. Those guys weren't focused on football. Those guys were, probably just as surprised as you and I to hear about, such vulgar comments coming out of his mouth. I mean, we've all known him to be a great football mind. He was once a great coach. He was a great analyst. But I mean, to hear racist words coming out of his mouth, I mean, that's not the John Gruden that we know. But like I said, if this is the John Gruden behind closed doors, if this is the real John Gruden, then no amount of punishment is going to take that away from him. He's going to forever be that sort of guy until he looks at himself in the mirror and really come to and really do some soul searching. Like, yo, is this who I am, or is this who I've been this whole time? I mean, if he has been, then he's done a great job of hiding it. I truly want to believe him. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt when he says that I didn't mean to have any sort of racist undertones. But I mean, seeing as there's so many people out there that are behind closed doors racist, it's hard for me to give him the benefit of the doubt. I mean, I think I saw this on Pardon the Eruption. I think it was Frank Isola. He was talking about how the NFL is predominantly African American. And so for a head coach to come out and say some stuff like this, I mean, how does he save himself? I mean, most of your team is African American. Like, how? See, this is why they lost against the Bears. I mean, this could affect them down the line when it comes to playoff season. So I don't know if any sort of punishment is gonna, do justice, is gonna do enough to really get rid of the awful stench that is racism. But I mean, I guess it's a step in the right direction. So fine him, suspend him, maybe fire him. Yeah, he deserves all the punishment in the world. I mean, you don't come out, and say stuff like that. I know it was 10 years ago, and I know the world was actually different too back then. But I mean, come on, bro. That's unacceptable. Like, that's not right. Not right.
So here's the thing, right? I know the NFL had a meeting today, and by today I mean Monday. And part of that, they meet every Monday, and obviously they would have looked into this. I don't think the NFL itself can do anything because those comments were made when he was not employed by an NFL team. And for sure he made, I'm not certain if you're aware, but he also made some disparaging remarks towards and about Commissioner Roger Goodell, on top of the racist remarks he made about DeMaurice Smith. So obviously, I think the NFL, their hands are tied and they can't do anything about that. So it comes down to owner Mark Davis and the Raiders. And typically, I'm not totally in favor of the sweeping cancel culture that we're seeing, Steezy, especially when you talk about people saying things 20, 25 years later. People can change and be different and have different viewpoints. And this was 10 years ago, although the world was supposedly a different place. 10 years may not be that far away. But as much as I'm not in total agreement with the whole cancel culture wave, I can't believe I'm about to say this, but if I have the Raiders, I'd fire him. And here's the reason why. It has been like, had the Raiders shown as a team that the comments did not bother them, it's just not a distraction, and they did what they were supposed to do and handle their business in Chicago or against the Bears and defeated them, then fine. But it's clearly a distraction because, and I mean, I'm not here to say that the Chicago Bears are not a good team. I don't want to take away anything from my own individual rival. But that's not the Raiders team that we've seen that went 3-0 to start the season. And I have to believe that these comments have proven somewhat of a distraction. If I'm Mark Davis and these comments that he has put out so far are correct, like you believe in inclusion and you believe in diversity and you believe in togetherness, the head of my organization or the person who looked at as the head of my organization is typically my head coach. And these are this belief, these words cannot be what emanates from that office. It cannot be what the head coach's office stands for. It just can't be, especially as you said, Steve, you went 75 to 80% of the league is African American. When I employ you as a head coach in the front office, I'm looking at you as a leader of men. I'm looking at you as a guy to unite, to bring people together, because not only by race, we're going to have people of different, values, of beliefs, And your head coach, more so than anyone else in the organization, not even the general manager, not even the owner. He is the guy you look to for leadership. He is the guy who is supposed to bring everyone together. Because even if you're saying they're only typically in any NFL locker room, there are two races that are going to be African American or Caucasian, more times than not. But there are other things that divide us, political beliefs, religion, whatever. And the head coach is supposed to be the guy you look to for leadership, for unity, for togetherness. This is the guy I'm supposed to be able to go to talk about things even beyond football. When you look at Kansas City, you hear players talk about they love Andy Reid because they look to him as a father figure. They can go to him and they talk about their personal problems. And we know Andy Reid to be the guy who has given people multiple chances. I mean, we've seen it none other than Eric Bieniemy, now Josh Gordon, Tyreek Hill. This is a guy who fosters young men. If I'm supposed to believe